The finale for House of the Dragon Season 1 was filled with tense moments and a ton of great details. In today's video, we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 things you missed in House of the Dragon Episode 10. We'll be looking at all subtle details like Easter eggs and references that may have gone over your head during your watch of the first season finale titled The Black Queen. So keep watching. First up, how House of the Dragon's Episode 10 concluded the first season. House of the Dragon ended on a high, with a great deal of dragon action and all the pieces moving in line perfectly for the upcoming war. Much like the first season of Game of Thrones, this finale was all about setting the scene and preparing for what's to come next. In fact, it was actually refreshing to find a series like this that didn't just attempt to cram in action sequences for the sake of keeping the viewers invested. Yeah, we're looking at you, Rings of Power. After this episode, it seems like the battle for the realm is about to take an extremely messy turn, and the ending with Luke's death is likely to be the turning point where things evolve from peaceful to all-out carnage. A day of reckoning is sure to come for Westeros, and you can almost feel that it's going to bubble up in Season 2 quite nicely. This finale perfectly exemplified what good TV looks like, with strong characters, an interesting premise, and a politically charged narrative that doesn't treat the audience like idiots. It's certainly not perfect, but it sure has been one of the bigger surprises this year. In fact, there were so many hidden Easter eggs, subtle details, and references to Game of Thrones that you might just blink and miss some. So, without any further ado, here's a list of everything you might have missed in House of the Dragon Episode 10. Our countdown includes the half-dragon baby, Closer to Gods, Kristen's battle technique, a familiar meeting place, and more. Beware of major spoilers if you're not caught up on the series finale yet. Starting with number 10, Who's the Dragon? Of course, fans weren't likely to miss the gigantic dragon that pops up toward the end of the episode, but the non-book reader audience might be wondering who that was. To recap, while Luke and Jace set out to gather allies, Daemon went into the bowels of Dragonstone and serenaded a big old beast. This was widely reported as the dragon Vermithor, the former steed of King Jaehaerys and currently the second largest dragon besides Vhagar. Now the scene seemed to imply an understanding between Daemon and the dragon, but seeing as the former was already bonded to Caraxes, it was a little unclear who would actually be riding the monster, if anyone. Clearly, the Blacks already seem to have more dragons at their disposal than riders. The audience is bound to see more of Vermithor next season, as the scene only provided us with a tiny sneak peek of what's to come in the future. Following up at number 9, the Dragon's Bond. It's often been said that the Targaryen family has more than an emotional bond with their dragons, and this episode gave a pretty clear representation of that. As Rhaenyra strained under the pressure of her premature birth, her dragon Syrax roared elsewhere, clearly feeling the same kind of excruciating pain. Interestingly enough, this wasn't actually the first instance of a dragon reacting to the experience of its rider on House of the Dragon. Back in the third episode of the show, Daemon torched the Triarchy fleet in a resounding display of force. At one point, he's hit with a flaming arrow, but it was his dragon Caraxes who cried out in pain. This lore goes even deeper than a psychic connection, but we'll be getting into that a little later. Next up at number 8, Kristen's battle technique. Sir Criston Cole did not appear in the final episode, but his presence could certainly be felt. At one point, Jace and Luke could be seen sparring on a nearby beach. More than just being older and larger, Jace was also ruthless and unforgiving, beating up on his younger brother and pushing him to the ground. This kind of take no prisoners fighting style was clearly reminiscent of the lesson Sir Criston taught the young boys back in episode 6 of the series. Despite there again being a huge size advantage, Criston deliberately paired Jace against Aegon, encouraging him to show no mercy to his adversary. It seemed like Jace was the one who absorbed the technique, and we're willing to bet he wished he had been kinder to his brother in one of their last ever interactions. Coming up at number 7, the Dragon's Illusion. Though people around him often criticized him, it's quite safe to say that Viserys was one of the wisest kings Westeros ever had, especially when it came to understanding his limitations. In the first episode, Viserys rejected the idea that the Targaryens could control their dragons, calling it an illusion. And while the viewers are well aware of their ferocity, it's in this episode that we really truly see the independent nature of the dragons. The rivalry between Aemon and Lucerys reached a boiling point at Storm's End, and it would seem that their enmity for one another, particularly Aemon's, have been imprinted on their dragons as well. Vhagar ignored her fourth dragon rider and instead assumed her dominance by wiping out the opposition. Not to mention, mention, the familiar meeting place at number 6. It's pretty fair to say that there's absolutely no love lost between Daemon Targaryen and Otto Hightower. In one of the scenes from episode 10, they were seen having a heated confrontation on the bridge leading up to Dragonstone. But interestingly enough, the scene paralleled the one that they had in the same location just 8 episodes prior. Still, while there were many familiar beats, many things have changed as Rhaenyra arrived on Dragonback to call back her uncle husband from starting a war. As if we needed any more similarities, Daemon even uttered the phrase "Mummer's farce," the exact words that Otto also used in their previous confrontation at the site. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised though, seeing how Ryan Condal wrote both episodes. We definitely see what you did there. We're now in the top 5. First up, at number 5, Closer to the Gods. It's sufficient to say that there were a lot of line callbacks in this episode, and we're not even done still, with the revelation that Viserys had passed and the Greens had claimed the Iron Throne in the name of Aegon. Rhaenyra was forced to rally the troops and see which houses would stay true to her cause. As it turned out, her sons Jace and Luke volunteered to be messengers for this cause. We don't need to remind you how that turned out, but Rhaenyra did remind them before they departed to be sensitive to the gods of the Seven Kingdoms, despite Targaryens being closer to gods themselves. The younger version of Rhaenyra spoke these exact same words in the series premiere. It's good that she hasn't forgotten her sense of humility yet. Coming in at number 4, Dragon on Dragon action. We figured that a show called House of the Dragon would feature more than a few dragon on dragon fatalities, but surprisingly enough, we had not seen it on screen before episode 10, even when the ice dragon Viserion fought his brothers Drogon and Rhaegal. In the last season of Game of Thrones, the Night King's destruction ultimately caused his downfall. Still, Daemon's prospect here sure made us fretful about its foreshadowing implications. Sure enough, when Luke traveled to Storm's End to rally the Baratheon support, he and his dragon Arax were challenged by Aemond and his massive beast Vhagar. Against her rider's wishes, Vhagar resoundingly ended the smaller dragon and its rider to boot. Following up, at number 3, Die Screaming. This quote wasn't just our last of these callbacks, and it wasn't our last Daenerys Targaryen callback either. While Rhaenyra was giving the most uncomfortable unassisted birth of all time, Daemon prompted a couple of Kingsguard members to re-swear their allegiance to the Black Queen, or choose to side with the Greens and be granted a painless death. But should they do so, only to become turncoats later, Daemon had a much less ideal option. Though ambiguous, it would seem that the Die Screaming threat was a popular one among the Targaryen heritage, as it was something that Daenerys also said, also in the season 1 finale of Game of Thrones, at the beginning of her conquest. It's yet to be seen if Daemon's knights would fulfill their promise, but many of Daenerys' former enemies sure did. Next up at number 2, the half-dragon baby. With apologies to Luke and his violent demise, the episode's most shocking moment came when Rhaenyra gave birth to a stillborn fetus. It was an absolutely gruesome scene, as its bloodied visage was shocking to even the least discerning viewers. But one subtle detail about the dead fetus was that of its scaly skin. The book's description of it made it even more apparent, describing the fetus as having a stubby, scaled tail. Now, it's often been said that Targaryens had the blood of the dragon in them. While the saying was often taken as a metaphor, it's actually been proven true more often than not. This was likely a result of old Valyrian blood magic, but Rhaenyra's stillborn fetus seemed to be the first time that the characteristic was manifesting itself physically on screen. Finally, at number 1, the Kingdom of Ash and Bone. Although they're different in their own right, Daenerys and Rhaenyra Targaryen were going to be compared to each other no matter what, and this particular callback would only further that likeness. When Daemon suggested leaning into their dragon advantage in dealing with the Greens, Rhaenyra shrewdly rejected the notion, fully aware of the fiery devastation that campaign would have on Westeros. In fact, her use of the ash motif took the viewers back to something Tyrion did, and Dany echoed during her conquest in the 7th season of Thrones. Despite Daenerys' best intentions, that's exactly what she became when she sacked King's Landing. Let's just hope Rhaenyra can resist the temptation of abusing that kind of power and following in her footsteps. And with all that, that's a wrap for this video. What did you think of the list of top 10 things you missed in House of the Dragon episode 10? Let us know in the comments down below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.